Hey, everybody. People are still logging on here. The numbers are going to keep bumping up, but wanted to start off with a bit of an intro. Our class this evening is how to work with contractors and how the rules are designed to protect you. One of our most popular topics over the years has been how to work with contractors. Obviously, it's a major issue for all of our members, and there's a lot of things that can go awry and a lot of ways you can protect yourself early on. So we are super excited tonight to have our speakers, Andy and Bill here, but we will talk a little bit more about them in a second. First, I just want to explain how things are going to run this evening. If you've not done a webinar with us before, we are recording, just so everybody knows. This is also on Facebook Live right now, so you can access this afterwards on Facebook. You can also find all of our webinars on our website at www.chicagobungalow.org. So it's always nice to be able to go back and revisit if you missed things or you came in late, etc. Andy and Bill are going to be speaking tonight from 6 to 7 o'clock-ish. And anytime we have left over between that presentation and 7:30, when tonight's webinar ends, is going to be for questions. So there's a Q&A box down in the middle of your screen. Linda, yes, we had a little glitch there with our opening screen. Linda has typed in there as well. So if you look down in the Q&A in the center of your the bottom center of your screen, that's where you want to put all your questions. Do not try to put them in the chat. It might even be disabled for everybody. So please don't put any questions in the chat. Anything we can get through up until 7:30, we will get through. If there are some remaining questions that are in there up until that point, we're going to print them out, and our very generous speakers have agreed to go through those and respond to them. We're going to send an email out after this as well. It's going to have a link to the recording tonight and answers to your questions that didn't get answered while we had time this evening as well. Please keep in mind that there are a lot of questions that are going to be answered while the presentation's going. So before you start worrying that we're not responding to things and putting things in the Q&A, a lot of it's going to be answered, I promise you, as we go. So maybe wait a little while before you start peppering the Q&A with your questions, just because we'll get to a lot of it. So, all right. I would love to introduce our speakers this evening. We have Andy Pierce. Andy's a Chicago journalist who is also a former city official, a historic preservation advocate, where I met Andy a million years ago, speaking to one of my classes actually, and a trained nonprofit manager. He was a news reporter and editor for 10 years, including Nixon newspaper in Indiana, the Local Learner, Chicago neighborhood newspaper, and Midwest Construction magazine. He served in the administration of the City of Chicago Department of Buildings for 8 years and was chief of staff for the Second Ward Alderman for 3 years. Most recently, he was a local development director for Boy Scouts of America, in which was a commissioned professional for 8 years. Also, Andy worked with longtime Uptown theater volunteers to found Friends of the Uptown in 1998 and has been integral to its website, email, and social media communications ever since. Andy has two historic photograph exhibitions on permanent display that you can see. Selections from the Hedrick Blessing Collection, a donation to public art on the 5th and 9th floors of City Hall, and Chicago 3 Centuries of Theaters on display at the landmark Chicago Theater. He's lectured for Chicago Architecture Foundation, Landmarks Illinois, the Glessner House, Cliff Dwellers Club, and the League of Historic American Theaters, and the School of the Art Institute, I should add, Andy. He and his wife, Beth Eckerty, own a 1925 historic Chicago bungalow that has recently won the Driehaus Bungalow Awards for restoration. Will Bugajski, sorry, I almost messed that up, even as you told me. So Bill Bugajski is an assistant director at the Department of Buildings, where he manages the daily operations of the Strategic Task Force. The Strategic Task Force is a unit within the Department of Buildings which enforces the Chicago Anti-Drug Gang House Ordinance. Strategic Task Force identifies, inspects, and initiates legal action against owners whose buildings are being used as drug or gang houses of places of ongoing criminal activity. The task force fields 3 inspection teams, each consisting of inspectors with conservation, plumbing, and electrical expertise. The primary objective is to document the existence of any building code violations in preparation for generating an administrative hearing and court complaint, and work with owners to evict drug dealers, improve their property, or sell it. As building department representative at administrative hearings on strategic task force cases, Mr. Bagaisky assists the law department when meeting with building owners and standing up at hearings on nuisance cases. He also participates as one of the instructors at landlord training classes offered 12 times yearly, where there are owners of buildings of the nuisance calls are encouraged to attend. A lifelong resident of Chicago's South Side, Bill has worked in the Strategic Task Force at the Department of Buildings for the last 26 years. He worked in the construction field as an estimator and project manager 18 years prior to working for the city of Chicago. He received certificates of architecture from the University of Illinois and Olive Harvey College. He received a BA in psychology at St. Joseph's Calumet College as well. Sorry, I stumbled on that a couple of times, Bill. A lot of information. That's quite a long job history. So happy to have you both here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and hide my screen and let you guys share your own screen and kick off the presentation tonight. And everybody, before I jump off, looks like another 30 people jumped on since I started speaking. So please keep in mind, we're going to do Q&A at the end tonight. So type any questions, wait a little while, maybe let them get through some information because a lot of stuff will be answered tonight. But if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and we'll get to that at the end. Thanks. And we can see that, Andy, just so you know, it's shared.
Okay, Andy, I just unmuted myself. Okay, and I think you need to do that as well. How you do, folks? My name is Bill Bagaisky. I work for the Department of Buildings. Thank you, Carla, for such a nice introduction. And I just want to say that I am also a bungalow owner in the city of Chicago. I love my bungalow. And, I deal with contractors every day. Currently, I have over 700 active circuit court cases where people have building code violations. And one of the ways that they would get out of court is compliance, which means that they hire contractors to comply with these violations. And I'm dealing with contractors day in and day out all day long. Good contractors and bad contractors. So some of the information I'm going to impart tonight is my experience working with good contractors and bad contractors, and hopefully I can give you some insight on how to weed out the bad and get the good. Okay, let's do the next slide. Okay, this one's mine, and we've got a research button on the keyboard here. And as far as selecting a contractor, I know you folks have bungalows and you want to think about projects, you're doing projects, you've done projects. And one of the things that I can really stress is the fact that the more research you do, the more knowledge you're going to have. It is so unbelievable the tools you have at your fingertips with the internet. And if you are planning a project, the thing you really need to do is educate yourself on what your project is going to entail. What kind of contractors can do the work? What kind of work can you look for in renovating or altering or repairing your house? And if you look on the internet, there is just such a wealth of information. You could spend days doing research. And one thing that I want you to know is that the more knowledge you have before you start screening your contractors and calling contractors, you will know all the right questions to ask your contractor when you're trying to determine if he's the guy for you or the girl for you. Now, I've got a note here that no matter how good the contractor is, I've seen, and in fact, my job is to inspect work. I've been inspecting work for 27 years. And one of the things that I see is that rarely is any job perfect. The contractors, the carpenters, the plumbers, the electricians, the masons, they have to work with products that are not perfect. Is there ever a straight piece of wood? Rarely. And they have to build a project so that it meets the code. And if they're a good craftsman, they want that to be a reflection of their skills and their pride. Very rarely is the job ever perfect. So if you're hiring a contractor and you're looking at their work, there's a lot of things to look at. But if you see a little errors here and there, this is something that's perfectly normal for any contractor doing the work. Okay, Andy?
There we go.
Okay.
Bill, I like what you said. I get a lot of folks who approach me as well, and they say, hey, I have these violations. What should I do? The best defense is compliance, right? You fix those things that are wrong in a timely manner and get re-inspected, and the violations go away and you go about your business. The exciting thing for me that is in doing any kind of work on your Chicago bungalow or any vintage home, you're the investor in that home on your block and in your neighborhood. The improvements you do increase your enjoyment and they increase the value of the building. And you keep that in mind as that is something you either want to sell and go on to your next phase of life or leave for your family. The more you do now and the less you put off, the more value and more enjoyment you get out of it. You can eliminate some of the known risks by following the building code and utilizing the power of the city's building permit and licensing processes. That eliminates a lot of the margins for error. Most of the stories, the horror stories we hear begin with, well, he didn't really think we needed a permit, or somebody said he was a good guy. You know, even with relatives, and I know in court you hear from many families who had relatives who were supposed to fix things and maybe didn't do the work but took the money and those kinds of things. You need to check everybody out, even if they're related. So, you know, hate to be that guy to tell you, but that's what we're going to tell you tonight. All the things we're going to go through really quickly tonight. We're going to cover the City of Chicago and Bungalow Association online resources. We're going to talk about how to hire a good contractor. We're going to talk about what kind of contractor it is that you need for the different jobs you might consider. Do I need a handyman? Do I need a general contractor? Do I need an architect or an engineer? We'll also say when you need a permit, and will I pull it or will the contractor pull it? Will I be expected to buy materials? How long will the work take? We're going to talk about signing that contract. They're called a contractor because they're supposed to engage in a contract which you sign and agree to terms. They're not really a contractor unless they're licensed and working under a contract. What inspections do I need from the city? When do they happen and who requests them? And in the end, how and when do I pay the contractor? And we hope that's when you're satisfied with the job and the inspections, if needed, are done. When we start here with how to hire a good contractor, most people go to Facebook and they ask their friends in the Bungalow Association, hey, who does this work? I want you to know that you're at the mercy of people who happen to be reading at that moment. You know, there's no one standing by who is an authority to answer your question at all hours. That's why we have the trusted referrals online. That's the compilation of knowledge and experience that people have shared with the Bungalow Association. You want to go there first, not to Facebook. Do your research like Bill said, and then have a discussion about somebody that you've looked up and say, okay, hey, who referred them? Have you seen them? Are they still working? Do they still do good work? Who else would you recommend? But don't make social media your first and best source. You're going to consult with trusted friends or coworkers who might have suggestions. You're going to look around your neighborhood for work that's been done recently that you like the look of, and talk to that homeowner and say, hey, who did it? Were you happy? What was the good and the bad? Any red flags about that contractor or their subcontractors? You're going to check to see if that contractor is licensed and insured. We'll show you on the city website where you can find that information. Then once you arrive at a contractor or two or three you're going to consider, you're going to ask for references from recently completed jobs that you can call and then go see. In my own experience, recently did a kitchen remodel in our bungalow. I went and looked at this person's work at a couple sites to make sure I was content with their quality of work and that the homeowners liked it. That's best case scenario. We all know during the pandemic, shortage of labor and shortage of materials, sometimes you're willing to take what you can get. But I tell you, it pays to go check references and to talk to people who have used them. Bill, is there anything you'd like to add here?
Yeah, in fact, Carla just let me know that my voice was kind of fuzzy. So Andy, you tell me if that's the case here. okay, because I might have a technical problem on my computer. However, I do want to look at a couple of these points before we go to the next slide. Consult with trusted friends. We're gonna look at the Chicago Bungalow Association. In fact, let's go to the next slide. We're gonna backtrack this one. Let's go to the next slide. The Chicago Bungalow Association, as Amy just said, has the trusted referrals. And I spent about an hour and a half today on the trusted referrals going through these. And I thought this was such a tremendous tool. So as you're looking for a contractor, these are one of the areas where you can research. I spend an hour and a half just looking at the different contractors and looking at their pages to see what kind of products they have and how they display who they are and the kind of work that they do. This tool is important. So all you folks that are thinking about a project, use this tool because it's at least a perfect starting point. I was fascinated by it. And Carl, I'm going to play with this trusted referrals later on because I just thought it was great. Let's go to the last page. Page
It is
6.
a good resource, and I like the map. You and I have lived and done projects on the far southeast side. Some folks aren't willing to travel all to parts of the city, right? So you talk to a contractor, maybe one of the first conversations is what zip code is this project in? Because that is time and cost for them. Proximity sometimes has a lot to do with it.
That's a good point, Andy. I'm currently having some work done on my HVAC system, and I was looking for a good contractor, and the travel time for the contractors was a factor. Some contractors that were highly referred didn't want to travel to the south side, so that's an issue. Let's go to page 6, Andy. Would you please?
So as we go by these, we're also going to talk about that you can search your building.
Oh, Andy, I wanted to go back to page 6.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, now, no, not 5, let's go back to 6. So we talked about the trusted referrals online with Chicago Bungalow Association. Another good way to get some hints on who might be good contractors is to start to spread the word. Now, as it says, this may take some time finding a good contractor. So if you wake up tomorrow morning and say, I think I want to do a project on the kitchen and the bathroom, and hopefully I can get the contractor lined up by next week, and we can start working by the week after. I think that's a foolish plan. It takes time to find the contractors. First of all, you have to identify exactly what you want to do, and then the search for the contractor could take weeks and months. And if you're really doing your due diligence, it might take that long, depending on the scope of the project. Now, you might spread the word. Now, Andy says, you might put it on Facebook, and you don't know who's responding and whether they're persons that you can trust. But if you have a trusted friend or coworker and you're spreading the word, and all of a sudden they might have a suggestion on who you can contact to look as a prospective contractor. So this is one of the ways I found a bathroom contractor for my bathroom, and it took me a couple of months before I can find somebody that I had confidence in. So that time did transpire. Okay. Now the other thing is search your neighborhood for recently completed projects that might match your project. I love that suggestion, because if you're thinking about doing some, let's say a new deck, some exterior remodeling, you can just walk around your own neighborhood, and if you see a job that was well done, it wouldn't hurt to knock on that door and see if you can get the contractor's name who did the job. And then if you're fortunate enough to have them give that to you, they may also do some comments on what experience they have with that contractor. Consequently, if you see some lousy work, you have the opportunity, you may want to talk to those people and say, well, what happened here? Usually they're more than happy to tell you exactly what they did and why they wouldn't do that again. So just walking your own neighborhood in your area just to see projects that are similar to what you want to do can not only give you ideas, but they can also give you leads to contractors who do good work. Now, ask the contractor for recently completed jobs that you can call on and go see. If a contractor cannot give you referrals, legitimate referrals, you can call people and at least talk to them, show them the door. Don't even give them the time of day. If they can't give you a referral, that is not the one you want to deal with. Okay, Andy, let's move on.
All right. We're going to mention that on the Department of Buildings website through cityofchicago.org, you can search the records on your own home on your address. And this is a tool you might use if you're looking to buy a bungalow. You could see what permits and violations it's had. You can know that up front. And then all of the city online resources, you can look up information about building codes. You can begin the permit process. You can learn about inspections and reports, and also trade licensing. Trade licensing is where you can look up to see if someone is licensed and insured in Chicago. And for work that requires a permit, that requires a licensed tradesperson, you want to make sure that they are holding that license in Chicago and that the person holding that license is the one doing the work. It has happened that people will loan out their license or people will use a license that's not theirs. And you want to make sure that you are dealing with the licensed tradesman.
Stay on this page, Andy.
Please.
Because as you're doing your research, and if you really get into your research, and if you want to check the building code, that construction code is what you're going to click on. I just wanted to identify these icons for a second. That could be kind of complicated, but it's there. Now, if you want to get an understanding, we're going to just scratch the surface today. We're showing you these clips of the building department website, and we're just scratching the surface. There is hundreds of pages once you start digging into the different icons. And if you want to know more about permits and what we talked about tonight, click on that permits. It's going to give you a lot more information than we could possibly give you tonight. Later on, we're going to talk about how to set up inspection reports or inspections by the city pursuant to a permit that you pulled. Let's say you have to contact the city for the inspection and the contractor is not. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But that's the icon you would click on to set up an inspection for, let's say, a plumbing rough inspection or electrical rough inspection or whatever. That's the icon you would click on the building department website. And as Andy said, if you want to check somebody's license, that trade licensing icon is the one that you would click on. Okay, Andy.
Very good. Now we're going to talk about the things that are the triggers that tell you, do I just need a handyman? Do I need a licensed general contractor? Do I need somebody who's licensed in a specific trade? Do I need an architect? Do I need an engineer? Do I need a combination of all of these people to get my project done? And Bill, I think we have a project here where...
Well, let's stay on this page.
Yeah,
first.
sure.
Okay. Now it's, when do I need a handyman? It's like, it depends on, what type of project you're doing with your home. And let's say, for example, the cost is a major factor. And you don't want to spend any more money than you have to, but you definitely want to get somebody who does a good job. Okay? Now, a handyman, if there's any permits that are required, a handyman is not the person that you're going to look for. Electrical, plumbing, or let's say the structural work. A handyman cannot pull a permit if he's not licensed in the city of Chicago. But, if you're doing stuff that doesn't require a permit, like painting, landscaping, things like that, handyman may be your best bet. Let's get into the specific trades. I'm going to jump to general contractor. We would be looking at plumbing contractors, electrical contractors, tuck pointing contractors, heating and air conditioning. These are specific trades that only do that type of work. And anybody who's licensed can pull the permits. Well, let's say, for example, you've got a problem with your HVAC and somebody in your local community who's got a storefront on the main street and has been in business for 35 years and his father has been in business and you're looking for a new HVAC system. Is this the guy that you want to call? Absolutely. You know, he's been working in the community. You can get easy referrals that are generally right in your own area. So the specific trades, like the plumbing contractor who's got a storefront that does plumbing and has been doing that for a while. Yeah, I'm getting messages over here. Those are trusted contractors who've been in business a long time in your own community. Again, you're going to ask for referrals too, because but that's a good start. Now, your general contractor, if there's a number of trades that have to be done, then your general contractor is probably who you need to hire because there's a lot of coordination that has to be done. Whether you need an architect or an engineer, let's go to the next pages and let's see if we can't put a picture to what we're talking about. Okay, here's an example of a rehab project that went on. I'm in Chicago Bungalow, and this is my house. and what I had there was I had a back room. This was part of the kitchenette and part of the kitchen, and there were 4 windows in the corner that was very unsatisfied. In fact, my wife was very unsatisfied, and we didn't like the location of those windows, and we needed to replace it back. What we had decided to do was to relocate those windows in the center of the walls. So if you look at the picture on the right, you'll see that they're no longer corner windows, but they're centered more in the walls and relocated. Now, this type of job involved we actually had to tear apart both walls on the back and the side. We had to shore up the ceiling joists and the corner of the roof to keep it from collapsing as we had that reframed. Now, this did require an architect set of plans. Why? Because we were reframing the entire wall structure to facilitate the rough opening for the new windows. Now, the windows are actually the same size, just a little bit different location, but an architect plan was required for me to do this project here. And the reason City or Chicago wants to see that architect plan is they want to know that the framing is sufficient to carry the load to the roof. And he has to show that on his plan. Let's go to the next picture, maybe.
Real quick, Bill, did you do radiant floor heating in this?
No, actually, that radiator that you see on the left is behind that little chair there.
Still there.
It's still there.
There you go. So now we're going to look the other direction in the next slide. Same room.
Same room. Okay. Now, this kind of shows the rest of the kitchen, and it shows the work that was done here. There was electrical work done. There was rewiring. There was actually only one receptacle in that room, and there was one light switch. So we had to do a lot of repiping. I did have to hire a licensed electrician. We did have to pull an electrical permit, and when we did have to open up those walls to run all that electrical conduit. Now, before we covered up those walls, we did have to have it inspected by the electrical inspector from the City of Chicago Building Department. So we did have to arrange for those inspections. I actually had to have the rough walls inspected before I started repairing any of the plaster. But in this case here, I acted as a general contractor, and you could do that if it's an owner-occupied bungalow. However, but the work that was involved here was the electrical. We had the carpentry work. We had the flooring work. We had the carpentry trim work. If you're looking at the back of the kitchen, we had the cabinet work. And actually these plaster arches in here were done as well. So we had a lot of plastering work. Now, if you're tackling this job yourself, the coordination between one trade and the next trade is critical. Because one of the things you don't want to do, you don't want to put the flooring first because it would be completely damaged. When you put in the electrical, when you start plastering the wall, when you start doing the finish work here. The general contractor would be responsible for coordinating all this work, making sure the right guys come in at the right time, and therefore the general contractor is critical here. This is just an example of what is entailed when an architect set of plans is needed and why they are needed.
Bill, I really like your sconces there, and you mimicked your existing arches in the home with the plaster in these arches, right?
We did that. In fact, when my wife talked about what type of look we wanted to have here, I was going for wood trim on these openings. And she had to have the plastered arches to match the other parts of the house there. And I think it turned out, wow.
Yep,
She was better at it
absolutely.
than I was. Can you go back to the last slide?
Yep.
Slide 12. Okay, one of the things here, and I wanted to point this out, is these windows here. They're a little bit different than the original, except that they're basically the same size and in light and same size in ventilation. That was critical. Well, there's more ventilation, more light in this room than what's required. It certainly meets the minimum standard. But the trim work on here matches all the original trim in the rest of the house. And we tried to achieve here is to get a brand new window that was operating properly and make it look like it was 100 years old. Actually, this house was built in 1926, so it's coming on to be 100 years old. So I think we were able to achieve the look of the original house, and it did take some work to get it to that point. So if you're looking for somebody to do the same type of work, skilled carpenters are essential here. So as you're hunting for a good contractor, you're going to want to see an example of the type of carpentry work that they can do.
And I just want to add that you saw a neighbor had used this green color. So this is the same room, but you did choose to change the color after you saw that nice green.
Yes, in fact, the ladies were responsible for picking out the colors, and they did one heck of a job.
They did.
Okay,
So half of the projects we talk about as bungalow owners and discuss and win awards for and all of those things, half of those we talk about don't require a permit. The other half do. And there's no easy or simple or one answer for them all. Any alteration to the structural components of the house need a permit. If you're impacting the structure, like Bill did in that room, he's moving those windows around, you've got to have plans, permits, drawings to do that. If an architect prepares the plans, the architect will obtain that permit. With his or her stamp and signature, they will go for that permit. Electrical contractors, licensed, always obtain their permits. Plumbing, HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, air conditioning, garage and other permits may be obtained by the contractor or the homeowner. And that will be something you decide and discuss in your contract.
Andy, let me jump in here. Is
Please.
like one of the advantages of you obtaining the permits. Let's say you're getting a plumbing permit or an easy permit for the work that you're planning, is that if the contractor's got to obtain the permit, he's going to charge you for that permit, not only for the permit, but for his time to go get it. So if you're looking to save some money, you may want to pull that permit yourself. Now that's getting back to the architect when he prepares the plans. The difference between an architect and a structural engineer is that the structural engineer is going to determine loads and calculations. If you're changing, let's say, the location of walls, you're going to remove a wall and expand your kitchen or expand, your living room, dining room, and you're eliminating walls. There may be some structural calculations on what type of beams are going to be needed, and a structural engineer is required. Usually, an architect will hire his own structural engineer if that's required in the set of plans he's preparing for you. Okay, and I just want to give you an example. I deal with so many contractors day in and day out. And this morning we were in court, and a woman says that there was an electrical contractor that was charging her $900 for a permit. And
900 just to get the permit?
$900 for an electrical permit. Now, a simple electrical permit would cost $75. If you're putting in new circuits, it's $150. This contractor was definitely taking advantage of that person. So I want you to be aware the cost of permits is something that you can always call the building department. In fact, there is on our website how much permits should cost. So if you're hiring the contractor and he's going to pull the permit and ask him, how much are you charging me to pull this permit? This is one of the checks you need to do. Thank you.
Bill, correct me if I'm wrong. The building department still has places where you can walk in and talk to people, even pandemic and post-pandemic. There are services that if you can't solve things on the phone or on the internet, that you can walk in and talk to a person.
Well, the building department is at 2 different locations at City Hall on the 9th floor. And you can go to the City Hall on the 9th floor. And particularly if you have permit questions or you want to talk to somebody that's from the building department, you can do that. We still, even with the pandemic, we have the walk-up desk that you can do that. The Department of Buildings is at 2045 West Washington. And all the inspectors are at this location here. So if you wanted to talk to a supervisor from any of the different bureaus within the building department, it's always good to call ahead and make an appointment.
Very good. We bring this up because chimneys are one of the most common repairs needed throughout Chicago, and it's one of the most frequent violations cited by the building department. And there are also some things here that do and don't need a permit. Bill, can you walk us through this?
Yeah, you know what? I've taught a lot of classes on the City of Chicago building code, and I like to show this particular picture here. And over the years, I've filed over 20,000 administrative hearing cases against building owners because of building code violations. And one of the most common violations that any inspector will see is a chimney that needs repair. Now, if you look at the chimneys on the left and in the center here, that's the same chimney. And when we first inspected it, you seen the chimney on the left there. It has loose brick and actually the brick that could fall down and potentially hurt somebody. It's a very serious safety violation.
It looks like bad Tetris. Or
Well,
good Tetris, I don't know which.
What's basically falling apart, and actually
It's Jenga.
It's retarding the carbon monoxide discharge there, so it's potentially dangerous in that respect too. Now, the reason I'm showing you is because they hired a contractor to rebuild this chimney. And I got to tell you, I see so much bad work on it, so much bad work. People will hire people and the workmanship is just lousy. It doesn't meet the minimum standard code. And they really shouldn't be in the contracting business or masonry business or any kind of business at all. But this one impressed me because I want to show you folks is that this chimney in the center here, they basically took it apart. They matched the brick that they needed. They reused some of the old brick, which is fine. They put a chimney cap, which is required by city code, and then they installed the either a new rain cap or the existing rain cap. And what you have there is a chimney that meets the City of Chicago code. Now, this particular chimney repair that you see here does not require a permit. If you're installing less than 250 bricks, then a permit is not required. That's the relaxation of the building code on masonry work. Now, this chimney on the far right, that is a chimney repair that does require a permit because of the amount of brickworks that are there. Now, here, you would have to hire a licensed mason. Only a licensed mason can get a permit to repair the chimney if a permit is required. But the reason I show you this, and I emphasize this, is because I want you folks to look at your chimneys. And I'll bet half of you guys out there will look at your chimneys and say, I think I need some work. And that's because chimneys have more wear and tear than any other part of the house. And that's because your boiler, your furnace is going on, off, all winter, all during the heating season. It's getting hot, cold, there's water freezing up there. So it needs repair more often than any other time.
Bill, I want to point out that when you talk about chimney cap, you're talking about this piece, which allows what, the condensation to come up and roll off and not hit your brick, right?
The concrete portion there, that's the
Yep.
chimney cap. The rain cap is optional. It's not required by code. It's also a rodent cap, you know, just to keep birds and squirrels and things from going in there. But that concrete chimney cap is so critical because it all that moisture that comes up through the flue, it condensates during the cold months, turns into water, and then it freezes up there. It would saturate into the brick, and the brick would start falling apart prematurely if the chimney cap is in disrepair.
I will say one thing about mortar here, because we could do an hour on mortar alone. With our old bricks, with our old bungalows, the common brick or the face brick, you want a softer mortar that's more lime and sand and less Portland cement. If a contractor is just mixing Portland cement right out of the bag, it's too strong. All of the moisture will stay in the brick instead of wicking out the mortar. And, 6 months or a year from now, he's going to come back and say it was bad brick, but it was good, strong mortar. That tells you they don't know how to work on vintage masonry and they shouldn't be doing it. So if you're having brickwork done, have a conversation about mortar and make sure they understand that.
Andy, you did your research.
You can see it. It's a plague throughout the city, but that's a whole nother topic, Bill.
Okay. This is something that I had to show everyone. This individual here, he's 76 years old, and he just completed building a chimney on his daughter's house. It just happens to be my wife's great-grandfather, Otto Wittfeldt. Otto was a union mason all from 1915 up to 1950. And if you own a brick bungalow, chances are this may be the man who laid the brick on your house. One of the reasons I love to show this is because he's up on the chimney or up on the roof constructing this chimney for his daughter, because as she had this house built, he insisted that I had to do the chimney because I wanted to be right. And whenever I teach code classes and stuff, this gives a real good snapshot of what a good chimney should look like. It does need to be cleaned up and water sealed. So actually, if you guys are getting chimney work done, make sure you seal that masonry at the proper time. Sometimes you can't do it immediately after the job, but seal it because that prolongs the life of the chimney.
Great picture, Bill. I'm going to run through this quickly. This is my advertisement for why you want to get a permit for work that requires a permit. There are consequences if you don't follow the law. Your project might be stopped, delayed, or derailed. You can run into violations, fines, court costs, and attorney fees. Unpermitted, incorrect, and unsafe work can harm your home, can harm your family. You may run into home insurance issues if you do significant work without a permit. It may impact the future value and sale of your home. If somebody does their research when they're buying the home that you're selling and find that you did this great, big, wonderful remodeling project, but no permits, they're going to use that to negotiate down the sale price. Neighbors may file a complaint. We got a lot of nosy neighbors. They see you doing work and they go and look up and see no permits. They may call you in to the building inspectors.
Andy, let me add a little bit to that last thing.
Please.
Is that as Andy says, is that when you buy a home, you're going to live with what's on that home. And if somebody did extensive work, let's say it was a room addition, let's say they did a whole gut rehab on the house. Let's say they rewired a house and they didn't pull any permits. And for some reason, the city inspects that and sees all this work done without permits. You as the current owner will be cited for that violation. Just because you didn't do it and you bought it that way doesn't mean that the violation doesn't exist. So as Andy said, do your homework when you're buying a house. Is the work that was done there since the original construction, was it properly permitted? And you can see on the website all the history of permits that have been through the building. Oh, and then if the city stops the job because there's work going on without permits, you cannot resume that job until the proper permits, and you're actually going to pay almost double permit fees. So it is costly if you try to risk doing it without permits.
Dependable licensed tradesmen do work under permits. Successful licensed contractors won't work without a permit. They don't want to risk losing their license and livelihood. If they do that and get caught, it stops work for them, and then they can't feed their families. So you see how that works? Licensed contractors are required to be insured and bonded. The city of Chicago holds license holders accountable for this work. Having a permit and a license on your project gives you more recourse if something goes wrong or does not pass inspection. The city can hold their license over them and call them in on things that are found wrong. If it's an unlicensed person, they can't do that. They don't have any control over them. Contractors require you to commit to a signed written contract. You have the rights as the owner and customer to have them commit to approved plans and a permit that requires the actual licensed person to do the work on site. So you're agreeing to all these things. Who's going to do the work? What's the scope? What's the design? And what is going forward in the permit that the city approves? If we take this away from buildings for a minute, what do you call an unlicensed merchant marine? If you encountered an unlicensed merchant marine working on the Great Lakes, what would you call him? That would be a pirate. In this case, an unlicensed contractor doing work without a permit is essentially a pirate, and you wouldn't want that pirate doing work on your home. The city's licensing of tradespeople is an important safeguard and is a part of the permit process. Bill, we're going to go into those things because sometimes it's easier to say what doesn't require a permit than it is to say what does require a permit.
Okay.
This is really important to many of us bungalow owners. All those interior surfaces and finishes, paint, wallpaper, tile, carpet, cabinets, drywall, or plaster up to 1,000 square feet without mechanical issues, without electrical or plumbing, non-fire rated ceiling tile replacement, non-fire rated interior doors. So if you're doing things that is essentially decorating, those things don't require a permit. If you're doing work that does require mechanical, electrical, or plumbing, and you're moving those locations, or you're changing it in some way other than replacing in kind, that triggers a permit. Interior repairs, in-kind replacement of windows, in-kind replacement of interior doors, replacement of a hot water heater, replacement of a furnace or boiler, in-kind replacement of AC equipment. All of these things we're talking about in a single family home, those things, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, don't require a permit.
That you're exactly correct. But let's take a look at those windows, for example. So if you're replacing a window, same size, same location, no permits are required in your single family home. The question was brought up as me and Andy were preparing for tonight is, does the energy code kick in here if you're replacing windows?
Energy code being a part of our building code and municipal code.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Energy conservation code, right?
Energy conservation, okay. And you know that there's all kinds of windows out there. There's the single pane, single glaze windows that were original to a lot of your bungalows. And they don't have the energy capability that the new windows have by all the major manufacturers. The energy code requires that windows meet a certain energy requirement. And the question is if you're, let's say you're replacing a sash and the glazing on a window that's 100 years old, and you have racy chains, and you just want to replace new sashes, do you have to comply with the energy code? The answer is no. You're doing a repair to an existing window, so the energy code does not kick in. Let's say you're replacing all the windows in your house and you want to keep them original construction, original sashes, original rates and chains. Do you have to comply with the energy code? As long as it's exactly as the original, you do not have to comply with the energy code. However, once you change that window, so you want to upgrade it, you're going to put in some sort of replacement window, then the energy code kicks in and your window contractor should be providing windows that are efficient to this particular area. Okay.
So
Right.
we want to look at a project that kind of shows some of this. This is a bathroom remodel.
Well, we're
Before
looking here of when
and
the
after.
permit is required. So this particular bathroom here, in fact, I won't keep it a secret. This is a bathroom project that occurred in my house. And what we wanted to do is eliminate the tub. As me and my wife are getting older, we have a second bathroom which does have a tub. But we wanted to eliminate this tub so we can have a walk-in shower, just for convenience. Now, we did look for a contractor. We searched for months to get a contractor that we were confident that could do the tiling and could do the shower pan. That was critical. But the question arose, do we need a permit here? Okay. Now, there's no permit required if you're replacing fixtures, same as existing. So here we are replacing the sink here, and that's same as existing, no permit required. We're doing tiling. We did some plaster work. We put in a shower door, and we put in the shower head and mixing down. Now, no permit was required for any of this work here. And so I just wanted you to be aware. So as you're looking for a contractor, maybe for a possible bathroom remodel, and the contractor is saying we don't need permits. Now, if he is doing electrical work in that bathroom, adding some receptacles or adding lighting, then an electrical permit would be required. In this case, we weren't doing that. If you were repiping, putting in new pipes, hot and cold water supply, new drains in there, because the old pipes were too old and you had to do some extensive repiping to facilitate the work that you're doing, then a plumbing permit would be required. But here that wasn't the case, so we did have a simple bathroom model that we're very happy with on each one.
If you moved the location of sink or toilet or tub, if you rearrange that room, you would need a permit.
You definitely would.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, you wouldn't need a set of plans. Okay, this would just mean that your piping, your hot, cold water supply, your vent, your waste is going to be in a different location. You would need a plumbing permit.
Very good. Another popular question is, do I need a permit for my fence? And here is a really nice fence project.
Andy, where'd you find this fence?
I don't know. It was in the neighborhood.
Okay, here's a fence, and the question is when do you need a permit for a fence? If the fence is 5 feet or less, no permit is required, whether it be wood or chain link. But if the fence is more than 5 feet, then it does need a permit. Now, maximum height is 6 feet or maximum height on a fence for residential, whether it be a wood privacy fence or a chain link fence. Let's go to slide 25 again. That's the fence.
Oh, the fence.
Yeah.
You know, it confuses people because there's a foot to play with there, right? Under 5 feet, you don't need a permit. 5 feet to 6 feet, you need a permit, and it can be no taller than 6 feet.
6 feet. And the reason I wanted to go back to this slide here is because what you're seeing here is that the posts are actually higher than 6 feet. So any post or any ornamental thing on top of the post doesn't count. So what does count is the top of those pickets that you see on the fence there. So that from the grade to the top of the pickets, maximum 6 feet. If your posts for either your supporting your fence or for your gate posts are a little bit higher, that's okay. As long as we're on this, I wanted to show that any kind of sidewalk work that you might be doing on your property, whether it be pavers or concrete sidewalk, does not require a permit. That can be done with no permits at all. Okay.
Very good. Landscaping, permit not required. Plants, vegetation, shade cloth structures for your nursery or agricultural purposes does not require a permit. Exterior work, re-roofing, except in low or no sloped roofs, you think flat roofs, they need a permit because there's an energy code requirement there about reflectivity. In-kind replacement of exterior siding or coating or painting, that doesn't need a permit. In-kind replacement of air conditioning equipment, in-kind replacement of porch stairs with a landing up to 50 square feet does not need a permit. Swimming pools with a water depth of 48 inches or fewer and not greater than 5,000 gallons do not need a permit. Playground equipment. And if you think about the little playhouses and things like that, those don't need a permit.
Okay, group R is residential.
Yep,
Now, let's
sorry
look at
there. We're going to look at a porch here.
Okay, now let's, for you guys that are looking at these pictures here, do you see any difference in the workmanship between the one on the left and the one on the right? I'll bet you're seeing a bunch of stuff on the one on the left. Now, the person who, this is a picture that one of my inspectors took, and the person that hired a contractor to build this stairs and stoop and that paid good money. And there's a lot of violations. It's way too steep. You've got inconsistent riser heights. The pickets are missing on the rails going up. And it's essentially a porch that we're requiring the contractor to tear down and rebuild all over again. Now the porch on the right, for example, now that would not require a permit. Neither porch would require a permit because it's less than 50 square foot of deck and it's less than 6 foot off the ground, 6 foot or less off the ground. So those can be built without permit. Porch on the right, you'll see that the riser heights are consistent. Workmanship looks kind of good and the picket spacing is correct. So this type of porch here, whoever had this porch built, they got their money's worth. Now that canopy over the porch stoop, that required a set of plans because it's structural. So here the stairs did not require a permit, the canopy did require a permit and a set of plans to show how that's going to be constructed and keep that in mind.
And Bill, you said that this doesn't have to be sunk into a foundation, that at this size, it can sit on a pad like this, right?
Yeah, the Department of Buildings, when we're seeing 2-story porches, porch systems, actually, if we're seeing an extensive deck that has can carry a considerable load, we are looking to have footings and foundations that go 42 inches deep. On little stoops and sets of stairs like this, if it's sitting on a concrete pad, just as you're seeing in here, that's perfectly acceptable. The only thing we're worried about here is really not load, but frost heave, but a properly poured pad that it might be sitting on is not really going to be affected by the frost heave.
Very good. Other exterior repairs that don't require a permit: cutting away or removing any interior, exterior wall, partition, floor, or roof that don't. So these are things, if your project doesn't involve these things, it doesn't need a permit. If they do involve these things, it needs a permit. Cutting away or removing any interior, exterior wall, partition, or floor, that's impacting the structure. Removing or cutting any beam, column, or load-bearing support. I heard a story from a friend recently who bought a home and they eventually figured out that somebody had removed a column in the basement. They needed then a structural engineer to design and replace that column because it had impacted the structure. If there's any removal or change or any means of egress configuration, that means your doors, your exit, front and back. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or fuel gas equipment or systems. So if your repairs don't involve these things, it does not need a permit. If it does, it does. Small accessory structures. These have become very popular in recent years. 1-story detached structures not more than 15 feet above ground, provided that the floor area is not greater than 150 square feet, without plumbing, don't require a permit. That typically includes tool and storage sheds, open gazebos, and playhouses. Minor electrical work, replacement of your light bulbs, doesn't require a permit. Connection of portable equipment to permanent receptacle outlets, radio and television equipment regulated by the FCC, installation of temporary system required for the testing or servicing of electrical equipment, installation of low voltage fixtures, that's phone, data, internet, installation of low voltage wiring in residential buildings up to 4 stories tall. That, all of those things do not require a permit. Something that's very popular, some of us have them, many of us want more outlets on the exterior. All of those receptacles, Bill, must be GFCI. What does that stand for?
Ground fault circuit interrupters. These are basically the same thing that you have in your bathrooms and kitchens.
Should have.
That's could have, should have. Because the city of Chicago code for all new and existing buildings says that you should have the GFCI receptacles in your bathroom and in all your wet locations, which is your kitchen sink.
So old ones look like this and don't have the ground fault interrupter, right? Is that what it is?
Correct, yeah.
And the new ones, properly installed, look like this.
That's like that, okay? Just FYI, if you have a deck outside, you have to have a GFCI installed, whether there's one there or not. The code requires that because they assume you're going to be looking for things to plug in.
So you can't do a deck without electrical service to plug in your tiki lights and so forth.
Or your TV outside or whatever it might be, correct. Okay, this particular slide, I wanted to show this, folks, because there's a lot of misconception with people about your electrical service. A lot of people feel that it belongs to ComEd and whatever in the house belongs to you as a homeowner. But, and I took these pictures from some inspections that we did. Here's an electrical service on the right that shows that the mast has been pulled off because of the storm. And the fact of the matter is that the owner has to call a licensed electrical contractor to make that repair. From the connections at the weatherhead all the way down to the meter housing belong to the homeowner. So on the left here, if you see a meter housing that's been damaged, that belongs to the homeowner. You got to call your own contractor to make those repairs. ComEd does own that meter, that glass meter, but you own all the rest. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that.
Bill, this looks like the Gallagher house on the show Shameless. It looks like all kind of things are going on there. Minor mechanical work, portable heating, ventilation, and cooling equipment like your window air conditioner, repair to any heating, ventilation, or cooling equipment that does not alter its function, basic repairs, self-contained refrigeration systems with less than 10 pounds of coolant. Those kinds of things still don't require a permit. So we've briefly gone through all the things that in general sense don't require a permit. Now we're going to talk about those things that definitely do require a permit. Here we go, right there. This form, which you will see online and is very useful, that the Department of Buildings has, this is going through all the different scenarios of what you're doing and what different permits are required.
Amy, let me jump in here just for a second.
Yeah.
Because I want to express to all you folks here that are applying for permits, one of the scariest things in the world is to apply for permits.
Is what, Bill?
One of the scariest things in the world is to apply for permits. And I want to say that because the 27 years I worked with the building department, sometimes people, they just don't have their paperwork right. They don't have their contracts right. We've got contractors that aren't licensed and stuff, and it takes forever to get their permits. Of course, if there's plans, then it requires extra review and extra time to get their permits. So the fact that when they get their permits, they feel like they've got the golden ticket. And I've seen that with homeowners. But I wanted to share with the homeowners is that I've been doing some work on my home, and I did obtain all the required permits that I had to have. And it scared the heck out of me too. When I got my permit, I felt like I had a prize here. So if you're going through the permit process and you feel a little intimidated, believe me, the building department tries to make it as easy as possible, but it's just one of those things. But there's some wonderful people in the easy permit department that will bend over backwards to help you, just in case you don't have all the right documents. Okay.
We're going to go through those scenarios quickly that do require permits so we can get through the material and make sure we have time for questions here. Easy permits, what falls into that category are non-structural repair and in-kind replacement projects. Some examples would be roof tear off, drywall replacement, repair to fire damage, piping and plumbing fixture replacements. Structural repairs based on an architect or engineer's letter or report, and in certain detached private garages and carports. So you can look at that easy permit flowchart online that walks you through the process. This is, I'll call it entry level, the smaller projects that the city developed this easy permit process for. Things you need to know for your easy permit application: your address, description of the work, specifying the square footage or area, cost of construction estimated, your PIN or property index number, all of your owner information, including emergency contact, the contractor's information or owner acting as the contractor. Bill talked earlier where he served as his own general contractor for his remodeling project. There's email, and also you can walk in to ask questions about the easy permit application, and we will share that in the information we will send later. The next step up is permits with plans or standard plan review. This is the more involved projects that do involve an architect or engineer to draw up plans, sign and stamp them, and submit it with the permit. You see mentioned there self-certification. Some architects and engineers in the city have gone the extra step to be self-certified so that they can submit and approve plans. And that's all part of what the city has done to help expedite this process and make it easier and faster. What are common projects that fall into these two categories? So the standard plan review, SPR, or easy permit being the easiest and first category, standard plan review being the more involved or complex. Dormer addition would be standard plan review. A porch enclosure would be standard plan review. A garage rooftop deck would be standard plan review. Unfinished basement or attic for occupancy, there's a lot of requirements. We want to make sure people are living in good, healthy places with the right ceiling height and right access to natural light and ventilation. If you're going to finish out your basement or attic, that needs to go through standard plan review. A change from radiant heat to central HVAC system, if you're going to go from your radiators and boiler to forced air, that requires standard plan review. It's pretty invasive to the house, takes a lot of work. A new entry or exit and install a deck, changing where your door is and putting a deck on, that requires standard plan review. Easy permit for kitchen or bathroom remodel. Additional bathroom is standard plan review or easy permit based on how far you're going and how invasive or comprehensive that project is. And Bill went through an example of that. If you're going to do solar panels, depends on the project, it might be standard plan review or easy permit. Your storage shed or other accessory structures, those are easy permits with plans. Solving violations or purchasing a home with violations, it depends. And I'll let Bill talk about that because it really depends on, how extensive the violations are.
Okay, Andy, let's go to the, we're running out of time. And I
Yes.
want to get back to the contractor.
Yes.
Got a lot to wrap up here, selecting the contractor. Real quick here, this is these two pictures show a new porch that was built by a contractor pursuant to a plan, pursuant to a permit that was pulled, that the contractor did the wrong job. The stringers here were incorrectly placed, not only on the deck that it's resting on, but incorrectly attached at the top. This would collapse anytime that it had any kind of furniture moving on there. We were able to catch it on our inspection, we made them do it over. It just goes to show that the contractor didn't do his job, and we caught it. So the purpose of the inspection by the city will actually save somebody's life here because it would have collapsed at one point or another. Just another reason for us to inspect that. It's
Right,
nothing-
and an excellent example, if you hadn't been doing work under a permit here, this wouldn't have been caught. The people would have taken the money, walked away, and the person would have been left with a dangerous porch.
Exactly. Brandon. Two reasons here why rails, this is my favorite slide, but I'm going to go fast here. Two reasons why your rails have to be 36 inches high and no more than 4 inches spacing on the pickets. Brandon and Augustus, those are my two grandsons that were looking at a squirrel chasing a rabbit, and they would have went right through those pickets. But this particular railing system was built to code.
You got to remember those two little guys.
One of the important reasons why we have codes. Okay, next one.
So we're working with a contractor. Will I be expected to buy the materials?
Okay, I'm going to fly through this one, Andy, because when do you need to pick out your materials? Let's say, for example, there's finishes that you want to pick out, floor tile, wall tile. You want to pick out your lighting fixtures. These are things that you want to pick out yourself, and you're not going to necessarily want your contractor to pick out for you. So if you're going and you're buying them, make sure that's stipulated on your contract so that there's no misconception there. That's something you have to have a discussion with your contractor. Who's buying what? And if you are buying them, you'll probably be expected to have them on the job site when it's ready to start. Okay. The other thing you need to talk about is a contractor going to disturb your life? So let's say you've got an interior remodel job and it's going to take 6 weeks to finish the job. Is he going to tear your whole house apart? Can you live there? Do you have kids that you need to get off to school at 8 o'clock and the contractors are wanting to start at 7? You need to have a conversation with your contractor on how he's going to disturb your life while he's working on your home. And I guarantee that it's going to happen. Okay? And then you need to talk about they're going to use your washing facility, what part of the home that they're going to be going in. And are they going to be cleaning up on a daily basis so you can still live in your house without having it all torn apart? Okay?
Bill, you can certainly tell when a contractor thinks he or she is done because they start cleaning up and pulling out all their tools and moving to the next job. But didn't you know projects only take 2 weeks, Bill? Everything will be done in 2 weeks. Get that 2 weeks written into the contract, but also an approximate date when it's really going to get done.
Okay, you definitely need to get that time span and put it in your contract. Now, when you're signing the contract, be very careful that everything is spelled out. So let's say, for example, you're getting a bathroom remodeling and you're getting Kohler fixtures put in there. Not only specify Kohler, but the model number and the color that's going to be installed. You don't want the contractor to show up with equipment that isn't something that you picked out, isn't maybe it's left over from another job. You're going to have to really be careful that the contractor spells out the equipment he's using, the type of material he's using, and who's the manufacturer and what's the models are. Okay, when permits are required, you specify who obtains them. Put that into the contract. Finishing and starting dates, just like Andy said, are critical. Now let's talk about the signing the contract and your payment schedule. I'm sorry that we're running out of time here because this is so critical. A lot of contractors require down payments, and that's not unusual in the industry. So if you have to give them a down payment, you would certainly never give them more than half down, and you would like to give them a lot less than that. Preferably,
What percentage down did you say, Bill?
okay, a lot of contractors want half down, and that's not unusual in the industry when they start. I would prefer that you pay them only 1/3 down when you sign the contract. Now, progress payments in a perfect world, it should be centered around your permit inspection. So let's say, for example, you have electrical and plumbing and there's rough plumbing that needs to be inspected, electrical rough work that needs to be inspected. You would pay them their progress payment when the inspection was done by the city inspectors and passed. If it didn't pass, don't give them their payment, their second payment. Now, your final payment should always be held back until the work is done and the final inspections are completed and passed. Because if they're not passed, you hold that money. That's your guarantee that that contractor is going to come back and finish the job. I can't emphasize this enough. I see so many contractors, they'll say, well, you know, it's going to take a while to get the inspections. Keep a couple $100 and then when it passes, then I'll come to get that other $200. No, if you've got a $20,000 job and there's $10,000 outstanding, you keep that $10,000 until it's done, inspected, filed, and passed.
We're going to talk about when do I need inspections, who requests them, and when. You talked about this a little bit, Bill.
Yes.
Typically, the contractor will schedule the rough inspection and finish those inspections before the walls are cleared up, closed up. You want to know when those happen and see the proof of that, so you can also do your payouts that you were talking about.
Yeah, you know, one of the things is that the permits are used. They belong to you folks. You know, it doesn't belong to the contractor. Those permits need to be posted, and when the inspector comes out to inspect, he signs the back of the permit saying that it's passed, or they'll note the defects that need to be corrected. That permit stays there and it belongs to you when the job is completed. If you have plans on that project, those plans belong to you. So if the contractor wants a copy, let him make a copy for himself so he can do his notes on there and work with it on the job. But those plans ultimately stay with you when the project's done. So you have that for your records throughout the life of when you own that home.
How and when do I pay? You talked a little bit about this. Always ask for written receipts on all payments. Ask for attic stock. Bill, what is attic stock?
Well, that's
any
a
extra wall.
term in the industry. So like, you know, you get some extra flooring tiles or wall tiles.
Yeah, you want to keep that stuff so that it doesn't go in the dumpster or doesn't go to their next job, because you may want to do it for more repairs or to match for other things you're doing. You want to ask for all of the warranty sheets that came with any equipment or fixtures, including the operation manuals, because when contractors start cleaning up, so much stuff just starts going toward the trash. I can tell you that I wrestled to get recycling done with some of the things that were done with my project, because that's something I really wanted and we talked about along the way. Never pay the contractor the final payment if the inspections have not been completed, and don't give in to pressure to pay until it's truly finished. Anything else to add here before we move to questions?
Okay, I'm just gonna end, you know, my talk here. I mean, 7 things you never tell a contractor. When you're looking for a contractor, never say that you're the only guy I'm getting a price from. Never tell them what your budget is. Never ask for a discount if you pay up front. If you're paying up front, you may get burned. Don't tell the contractor that you're not in a hurry, because then it'll take way too long to finish the job. Don't let the contractor choose your materials. You choose the materials and get exactly what you want. Don't let the contractor hire somebody illegally. It calls for a licensed plumber, licensed electrician. Make sure that those persons are licensed. And don't make any gentleman agreements on the cost and extras. But whatever the cost is, make sure it's in writing and make sure that all the extras are done in writing. Those are 7 things that you never tell a contractor.
Those are good 7 things. And I would add, even if they're a neighbor, a friend, or a relative, still get it in writing and do it the right way.
All right, thank you guys so much. And yeah, those are a good 7 things. Such common things that seem to come up when we've done these before too with our members. All right, we're going to get through as many questions here as we can.
Let's do it. Rapid fire, sudden death.
I'm going to rapid fire it. Yeah. All right. Does tuck pointing require a permit? And where to get a list of items that do require a permit? I know you've mentioned this, but if we could just maybe say the website, you know, how to find that again.
The City of Chicago website, the building department website, if you click on that icon that says permits, there are pages and pages and pages of what we just scratched on the surface. Tuck pointing, normal tuck pointing doesn't require a permit, but as soon as you're grinding, and making dust, it does require a permit from the environmental.
And people are typically referring to repointing, which, you know, most people do the grinding, so that does require a permit.
How do you remove a building violation that's been repaired? And is there a fee for that?
Well, let me address that because that's what I do day in and day out. If there's a violation, as a matter of public record, and you want to remove that, certainly the Department of Buildings will look for compliance. Let's say you have compliance and our city records were never updated. You would call the building department, talk to the supervisor who was responsible for that violation being on our city records, and they will clear that violation from public record to show that it's compliant. I do that every day.
If it's a violation that required a permit, you're going to have to pull that permit for the work and show that it was done correctly, right, Bill?
Yeah, and let's say you buy a house and it's got a bunch of violations and you want to clear those up. You need the proper permits, you need compliance, you need an inspection too by the Department of Building. You would arrange that with any of the supervisors.
And is there a way to find out how much the permits cost in advance?
There is on the building department website, when you click on permits, there's a section there that how much permits cost. Let me do some rapid fire here. Fence permit, $150. A general easy permit for remodeling would be $300 or $550. Plumbing permit would be $150. And let's say that you have a architect set of plans and you're going to rehab your entire bungalow. It would be anywhere from $1,200 to $3,000. More like $1,200 would be the standard time to do.
cityofchicago.org/buildings, right?
Yes.
All right. We should actually probably put that in the follow-up email as well. And where do you have to physically go into the Department of Buildings to get those, or can you get those online now? And I'm sorry if you mentioned that. I was kind of scrolling through and I missed a couple bits as well.
Well, okay, electrical permits, the electrical contractors pull those, they get it online and they never have to go anywhere other than their living room computer. They will give that to you. That's why that guy who charged $900 for a permit, electrical permit, should be whipped. However, if you want to apply for easy permits online, you can do that. However, you've got to go to the Department of Buildings to pick it up and pay for it. But you can get that whole permit process all out of the way online.
Okay. One person mentioned that they had interviewed a lot of architects and not all of them will pull the permits. They had to hire an expediter. Is that typical?
The answer to that is not typical, but common. Okay. A lot of architects work with expeditors if they're a licensed expediter with the city of Chicago. They can submit the plans, and a lot of architects don't want to be bothered with that, so they work with expediters. A lot of architects will do that directly. So you see everything out there. You see one with expediters, one with architects. It just depends on the individual architect.
I saw that one, Carla, and that one's disappointing. And I would, at the scale and scope of most bungalow projects, unless it's, adding a second floor, I don't know, like I would tend to keep looking. To me, it's strange that the architects wouldn't pull the permit and they wanted to add the cost of an expediter.
When is a rough required to be done? And I think they want a little clarity on what the word rough means.
Okay, rough inspection is not a finished inspection. So if you're opening up a wall, taking off the plaster, or you're restudding a wall, there's things in there that the building department needs to look at. First of all, we need to look at the studding, the wood studs that might be in there, or whatever structure that the wall is made out of. We want to see that. We want to see anything that's in there. We want to see the electrical conduit. We want to see the electrical boxes. We want to see any plumbing pipes that are in there. We want to see if there's any HVAC ductwork in there. And we want to make sure that that's done correctly, because if it's done correctly, then it's safe. But if it's done incorrectly, it's potential safety hazard, particularly electrical, because there's more fires that are caused by electrical than any other cause from faulty wiring. So the Chicago building code for electric is tougher than any other part of the country. It's for good reason. So that the electrical work is done safely. You want to see those things. And then that's called a rough inspection. When you put the finished drywall in, we're going to come back and inspect that's the finished inspection.
Okay, if I'm looking to have my front porch concrete steps rebuilt by a contractor, do I need a permit?
Good question. Depends on the size. Okay, and I would say that if it's under 50 square feet and less than 6 feet off the ground, then no permit required.
So a typical bungalow, what do you think?
I would say
That's what they're asking.
typical bungalow, no. No permit would be required.
I know you can't know for sure, but certainly a lot of folks are probably asking about those. I just want to remind people too, we're wrapping up here in a few minutes, but we're going to take a bunch of these and respond and have that list go out in an email to everybody after this. It might take a week or so to get that out to you guys, give a little bit of time to gather this stuff along with the recording from tonight as well.
Carla, I just surveying some of the questions, a lot of them have to do with things they discovered that the previous homeowner did.
Right.
When you buy the house, you do buy all of those issues, and to correct them, you need to get the plans and permits to correct them in your time, so that when you resell it, that it's all legit and it sells at the highest price.
Yeah, and they wanted to know, one person, actually 5 people liked this one. If you could talk about, like, what are the consequences of not taking care of that stuff? Elaborate on the risks of purchasing a home without a record of permits for work that was completed prior to owning the home.
Well, the consequences, let's say the building department never comes to your building to inspect ever. Well, then we're not going to document the existence of any violations, even though the violation may be there. Now, an astute home buyer will look at it when you're ready to sell your home. An astute home buyer will look at your home and say, "Wait a minute, there's work that we've done here without permits." Or they have a home inspector and they'll say, "This work was done incorrectly." You, as the current owner, is going to have to toe the line on it. So if the building department does inspect your home for any reason, and we're a complaint-driven department, so we're not going to come out there unless there's a complaint. If we do come out there, well, then there's a building violation. The cost of the penalty for a building violation is $500, $1,000 per day if the city chooses to go after it.
Okay.
And the city's not going to chase that previous owner or flipper or contractor. You need to talk to an attorney and see if it's worth your time and money to try to chase them for what was done in the past. The city does not, go chase them for you.
Right. So all right for you, 2 more and then we'll cut it?
Please.
Okay, great. This one has come up a bunch in the past. How do you determine who owns a fence that separates 2 properties, and who can come out to determine that?
Well, I'm going to address that because what's on your property belongs to you, and if you know your property lines, if you had a current plat of survey, they will record if the fence is on your property. And if it's on your property, you own it. Now, there could be a dispute, and that's why if you're building a fence, get a plat of survey so you can get your property lines well marked so that you can build it within your property limits there. Even the concrete that you put in the hole has to be on your property. So if you're trying to determine who owns the fence, the city's not going to do anything to make that determination. You have to hire your own surveyor to do that.
No, that one's too big of a question. This is good. How long are permits valid?
Oh, you
1
want to say
year.
that, Amy?
1 year.
1
No.
year?
No,
Oh,
no, permits are good for, they're good forever. And I'll tell you, here's the code. If there's inactivity of a permit for 6 months, it becomes void. Okay, so if you're working on a project and you're working continuously and it takes 2 years, like the Sears Tower, or 3 years, that permit's good until the project is completed. But if there's inactivity for 6 months, then the permit becomes void. Now, let's say you're a homeowner and you're working on your building and it's taking you years and years to get that done. As long as it's there's activity going and there's not more than 6 months left, that permit could be good for years.
All right.
I want to field this one really quick. My house was rehabbed, but some things were hidden. Where would I get prints of things done? This person could probably look online right now and see if there were any permits filed. And if there were, there are chances there could be drawings there on file with Department of Buildings records. But if it was done without a permit, we're not going to have plans that weren't submitted with the permit that wasn't submitted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, also, if you want to see if there's any plans associated with any of the history of your building, you would contact the Freedom of Information. There's an individual named Chris Lynch who's in charge of the Freedom of Information. He'll check records to see if there's any plans.
All right. With that, we will release you to your evenings. Thank you so much for this. Really appreciate it. Again, we are going to send out an email answering more questions that you guys posed tonight. It's also going to have a recording of this and any other info we mentioned. Also, the Department of Buildings website will have in there as well. Thank you all for spending a couple of hours, hour and a half with us tonight as well. And we will see you in our next seminar, which you can find at www.chicagobungalow.org and click on our programming, I believe it's called on there. So we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you,
Andy.
Carla. Thank you, Bill.
Bill,
Thank you, Chicago
much
Bungalow
appreciated.
Association.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you
want
to
to
the.
thank everybody who stuck with us. I'm honored that you sat here and listened to us for this time. It was truly my pleasure.
Great. Thank you so much.